We talk so much about Georgia. I think so much about Georgia. The redistricting, the court cases, the voter suppression. And I was mentioning this to someone the other day. And they said, well, you know, my friend is running for Congress in Georgia. Maybe you'd like to talk to him. Are you kidding? I'd love to talk to Bob Christian, who is running for the U.S. House to represent all of Georgia's 7th Congressional District. Put it together for Bob Christian, everybody.
Hey, Mark, thank you so much for that. It's you mentioned right off the bat, I wanted to touch on, you mentioned the redrawn maps. The reason I'm in the 7th district this cycle, because I'm a two-time nominee. I ran for the 6th district last cycle, and this is my 3rd congressional district in 3 congressional cycles. I was moved from the 9th to the 6th, and that bothered me so much that I decided to run for the 6th. And I'm going to take full credit that they redrew the maps again, because I pulled almost 40% of the vote as an unknown Democrat. So I know what I'm saying is resonating with people. So they redrew the maps again, and now I'm running for the 7th district. And so it's been it's one of many parts of their plan here in the state. But lead in with the questions we had talked about it. You said
I'm so glad to be able to talk to you and at least address that right out of the chute, because I do want to get to you and some of the positions you've taken on policy and exactly what's involved in trying to win public office in Georgia. I have to say, I used to know so many people in Georgia, and I feel as though through the years they've all kind of melted away. So it's great to actually connect with a Georgian who can speak in real specific ways about the different ways in which Georgia seems to have tried to elude the people's voice. So gerrymandering, redistricting is obviously one of the ways you can entrench power. And then I really want to talk to you also about voter disenfranchisement, because I think that's a real contemporary issue. And I feel as though Georgia's kind of taken it to high art. So wonder if you can first speak to the redistricted maps. Now, there were, because, and by the way, for those who are saying, well, I don't live in Georgia, you know, this applies to all of us, because this redistricting and gerrymandering goes on state to state, as everybody knows. But what was going on in Georgia was real court cases that were contesting the way the lines were drawn. Can you just bring us up to speed briefly on that?
Obviously in 2020 we had the census. In the middle of the pandemic, the census was very difficult to carry out, and it created population changes, and that's what maps are drawn off of, is the results of that census. And so here in Georgia, they drew a map that changed the districts around. They moved some of the minority population specifically, but it's always a chess game of where we can move Republicans and where we can move Democrats. And usually who's ever drawing the map tries to draw them in their favors. Republicans have been running the House down here, have been running the legislature down here for 20 years now. And so those maps become more and more and more entrenched as red districts versus blue districts. Well, when they redrew the 2020 maps for the 2022 election, across the state, lawsuits were filed saying, look, one, you've illegally moved minority populations around. 2, you're actually illegally moving the map around. We don't think this is the right way to do it. And it was found to be an unconstitutionally drawn map. That was the ruling that was made by a judge, but he made it so close to the 2022 election that they went ahead with these maps anyway. And now, as we come to 2024, we've got brand new maps. And they moved entire districts around. You never would have thought just moving a number on a map would have created such confusion. But like I said, I ran for the 6th district last cycle, and I'm north of Atlanta. My district extends up into north rural Georgia. And now suddenly the 6th district is in eastern urban Atlanta. So they just moved the number 6 across the map and kind of changed that around that way. And it created a lot of confusion among voters, among candidates. And it really threw things into a loop. And that's kind of where we're falling out, because currently the candidate that I'm running against is the incumbent for the 6th district. So he is the current representative in the area that we're all in. And then when the new Congress is seated, when I take this seat from him, that's when the 7th district will come into existence. And so we're running for a seat technically that doesn't exist yet.
Wow. Wow.
And it has led to a lot of confusion.
And one of the things you said in that was just astounding to me. I remember when it happened, which was we're realizing, or we're ruling on this so late in the game, that let's just use these crappy maps that we've just ruled are crappy and completely biased. We're going to still use them, though, because it's just too late to change maps. So in a way, we established the poison, but we were unable to legislate the antidote in time.
Exactly. It's and we're seeing that play out in this cycle as well with the election fraud cases that are happening around the country. And we've got one here in Georgia where the fake electors and the false ballot applications, um, and we're seeing that being delayed and delayed and delayed by a series of court cases and challenges and rulings and amendments and all of the if, nots, and whats that go into it. That we have several battles around the state between strong Democratic candidates and election deniers who filled out false paperwork, committing what I think is a crime, but we can't get that judgment because our court systems process things incredibly slowly. And so I don't think we're going to see a trial in that regard on the elector cases here in Georgia prior to the election, meaning that it's very possible that we can elect people to office who are under indictment and may still be found guilty of alleged crimes that they committed during the last electoral process, which in my mind would make them ineligible for office, but it will lead to stronger or, more and more court cases is all that's going to happen.
Well, and it just feels as though that's part of the game as well. Those delays, those court cases, that's all part of delaying the inevitable, which is a loss in the case of the GOP in many places. Now, Georgia, you can give me a real sense of it. It's a state that's changed a lot, right? The urban centers tend to lean center left, I guess, or Democratic districts or Democratic dominance tends to sort of float to those places. Give me a sense for the rest of Georgia and your 7th Congressional District, which is, as you say, I didn't realize this, doesn't really exist until you'll take office. But is that north central part of the state? Where is that?
North Central is a great way to put it. It extends up in the northwest. The farthest north county is Lumpkin County, and people probably know Dahlonega, Georgia, home of the first gold rush in the United States. It's that area up in there, very rural. This summer we've had a lot of black bear sightings. That's how very rural the area is. And but they've got a solid, small core of Democrats, but it is a bright red county, and so it's going to take a little bit of time to flip Lumpkin County. I live in Dawson County, which is in the middle of the district. It's kind of become that urban area that people are leaving the city to get into the countryside from, but we're now the fastest growing North Atlanta metro county in state of Georgia, and we border on Forsyth County, which is one county closer to Atlanta, that was the fastest growing county in the United States of America during the last election cycle. So that change is coming out of the city, and because of the huge expansion of jobs available to Georgians under the Infrastructure Act, we're seeing a lot of people come in to the region that had not lived here previously, and it's changing. It is changing very much. We've got several seats in Forsyth County at the local level that are becoming flippable, that are up for grabs. We're going to see some blue shifting as we get a little bit further north now. The 7th district, as itself, it is still an incredibly challenging district. I have an opportunity to win it, and I'm taking full advantage of that opportunity, but it's going to be a close race. It's not like I'm going to run away with it. And the honest answer, when I win this race, it's going to shock everybody because it's listed as an unwinnable race.
Oh, that's just wild, Bob. That really is. And the infrastructure bill, you mentioned it. It's obviously the effects of it have filtered down, as you've suggested. I'm wondering if the connection between Democrats and that infrastructure bill has also filtered down at all to that deeply red crew?
Not so much. And part of that is because in our district, the current representative, Dr. McCormick, has requested $0 for 2 of the fastest growing counties in the state. He has actually proposed and passed no legislation directly related to his district. He has not received any appropriations money for the area. And it's going to make it difficult because we are a smaller rural area as you get further north in the district, yet we are some of the fastest growing regions. For instance, Dawson County has 1 high school still, and that's awesome. It brings that small hometown community feel to everything. But at the rate we're expanding, we're going to need to start planning and building out our school system, our emergency support systems, our medical systems, our fire systems at a rate that we have to build those faster than the rate of growth, or else we'll lose all those services effectiveness. And the tax base that exists in Dawson County is not enough to sustain that growth. So without an influx of money from federal programs, from state programs, I don't think we'll be able to keep up. And our current representative is just not interested in bringing that money into the district because of whatever reasons behind it all, but it's money that's there. It's our tax dollars that have left the state, and I really feel like our representative should be doing the best he can to bring that money back to us.
Of course. I mean, and you speak so well about the urgency of, with an expanding population, getting those things in place. And, sometimes those are tough political battles to win because people don't see them necessarily as immediately helping them. It's like buying the new reservoir out here in California, and people don't really want that. Yeah, but yeah, can't we use that money now for something now for me now?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that's the big pushback. Like I said, in the southern end of the county, it's very urban. We've got North Metro Atlanta specifically, and then it moves into a lot of urban buildup that's coming in, suburb style living. But as you cross into the north, it does become more and more rural. And as you get into the northern counties, what you hear a lot is we don't want the growth. We moved out here to get away from all of that, so we don't want it to come here. And so the first fight you have to have is convincing them that that growth is coming. No matter what we do, we can't put a barrier up at the county border and just say you're not allowed in here. It's coming. And part of the reason it's coming is because as you move further north, housing becomes more and more affordable. Housing is an entirely different conversation for a different day, but it's part of what's driving the growth is that we are building affordable housing. But like I said, the more people you have, the more need you have for medical services and all the infrastructure, internet services, digital services, police, fire, and medical. All of that needs to be put into place. And then there needs to be a road structure that supports that. And there are billions of dollars that have already come to Georgia and billions of dollars still available to come to Georgia. We just need somebody to go and get it. And that's part of my platform is helping us build to sustain growth and do it in a sustainable way. And on the other side, we get crickets when we talk about what's happening with the growth here in North Georgia.
I want to get to the voter disenfranchisement in a moment, but I want to talk just for a second, follow up on something you've just said, which is associated with a compelling message. Like you've just mentioned these things in the last 90 seconds, and I think, gosh, these are imperatives that I would think voters would really spark to, but they have to hear them. And I'm wondering, is Bob Christian on enough? This is one of the things you know so well. I was mentioning it in relation to who was the guy? Who was the guy who lied all the time? You got me the
Donald Trump?
No.
Hey, Mark, it's George Santos here.
Oh, George Santos. That's right. Thank you. So I was mentioning, when he phonied up the resume, or there were certain huge holes, like gaping holes that clearly just couldn't be true. I was saying that when you run for Congress, oftentimes in some of these smaller districts, the big local news stations in New York City, in the case of George Santos, they don't really cover it. And so you can kind of get away with it until you get the seat. So similarly with you in this district, it's a smaller district. I'm wondering if you're getting any real media heat, because it's like, again, one of those races maybe that the media doesn't pay as much attention to. And so the message that you have, which is so compelling, never really gets out there in a big way.
To an extent, that's true. Like I said earlier, this has been labeled as an unwinnable race. And like everybody else, media has resources, limited resources that they can put in the regions. And so when they get that ranking that says, that's going to be too tough a fight, there's not a lot of coverage that comes up that way. And through the first half of the season here, from the beginning of the year, we declare as candidates in February. So from February forward, I was working with my base, securing the Democratic votes in the area. And then when we went through the change at the top of the ticket, there's been an entirely different atmosphere. Within 2 days of that, they were opening a Harris office, campaign office in my district. I got to speak on the same platform as Governor Beshear, so there was news coverage that came in for that. We did have the state election board shenanigans, which I'm sure we're going to talk about in a minute. And we also had a big fiasco over an African-American AP Studies course here in the state. And I got to participate in a lot of that, get in front of some cameras there. And that started to spark. It's, no one was more excited than me when I got the phone call saying Mark Thompson wants you on his show. So it's like, God, thank you enough for this opportunity. But last night I spoke to a national organization called Defense for Democracy about the danger to our public schools. Next week I'm doing a veterans forum with some veteran candidates here that are running for Congress in North Georgia as well. So we can talk about the impact of Project 2025 specifically, but what it means to be a veteran in this new governmental environment that we live in. And so that coverage is coming. And as we get closer, we're 88 days away from the election, even closer for early voting. As we get closer and closer to that election deadline, we're going to see more and more coverage in the area. I think we've got opportunities for 5 candidate forums coming up in the next 30 days. And so the coverage is coming. But the honest answer to your question is the first 6 months of this was tough. There was not a lot of attention being paid to what was going on.
And it's just so sad that you need money to, get the word out, and these are all sort of systemic issues, I'd suggest, with American elections, but that for another time. Let's get to Georgia specifically. You guys are getting headlines for what is, I think it's a high art going on in Georgia, which is the ability to disenfranchise so many voters at
Oh
one
my God.
time.
High art is a great way to put it. I've always told people that we are the laboratory for the MAGA branch, for the extremist branch of the Republican Party. They're using Georgia to see what they can get away with. What can we pass? What are the challenges that we're going to face? How are we going to fight the lawsuits that eventually erupt from that? They're using our state as their learning platform, and they're quite honestly doing a damn good job with it. They've made it easier for individuals to challenge any voter. And in Forsyth County, one of the major counties in my district, they've had 69,000 voter challenges since the 2021 cycle. And out of those 69,000 challenges, only 214 people were provisionally challenged from being on the rolls. There are outside groups, primarily True the Vote, based out of Texas, that are providing individuals within the state AI-generated lists that they've compared off of national databases, such as the change of address database. And they're using that, just the fact that somebody changed their address, as a reason to declare them not being on the poll or on the roster. And here's the thing. My nieces and nephews, they changed their address because they went off to college. They still live here in Georgia, but they want to get their mail where they're hanging out, and that's not illegal. They're allowed to do that. It's not illegal to be registered two places. It's illegal to vote in two places. And so they've made it easier for folks to challenge. There's one man submitting lists that are 12,000, 17,000 strong. And that bothers me because I'm a firm believer in one man, one vote, or one person, one vote, I should say. And it sounds for all the world like that guy's one person with 17,000 votes. And that's an anathema to me. That's so against our democratic principles that it bothers me immensely. And now the state has made it even easier. One of the things that we're well aware of here in Georgia, and I don't know how much this got reported across the country, is in addition to all the shenanigans that are making the news, they just launched in the last couple of weeks a website to where they want to try to make it easier that if you move away, you can take yourself off the rolls yourself. But all you need to remove somebody from the rolls is the last four of their social, their date of birth, and their first and last name. And anybody can go to the website and put that information in and hit the button and have that guy potentially removed from the rolls. And the first hour of the day that it was launched, anytime you typed in a name, it automatically filled out the rest of the data.
Oh my God, that's just incredible.
Yeah, so it was this huge security glitch, and they got it fixed. I mean, to their credit, they identified that immediately. They brought the site down. It was only compromised for about an hour or so, but we live in a technological era. We know how much damage can be done with a digital device in an hour. And so we're not seeing a lot of results from that. But the fun side of this is that the first person that was challenged was Brad Raffensperger, our secretary. And some wag out there was just like, you know what, I'm going to show you how bad this was. And then the second person that was challenged was Marjorie Taylor Greene out of the 14th district.
That's just wild.
Mark, it works real quick because it's a felony in the state of Georgia to falsify voting records. And so now you're going to use the Brad Raffensperger challenges and Marjorie Taylor. They're going to try to track down those people and charge them with felonies. And so apparently it's okay for us to just take random people off the roll, but dear God, don't attack the leaders.
Oh my God, what a mess. And this is enabled by a legislature and then a governor, et cetera. I mean, even Secretary of State that is disposed to this thing that it's the dance that Georgians have been doing for so long, which we've just described, which is just getting people off the rolls so that there's never really the people's voice.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's now, like I said, there are legitimate reasons to remove a person from the polls, and Georgia has a pretty good legal system in place to identify that. The polls get purged once a year by the Secretary of State's office in a very regulated and controlled fashion. And the primary reason people get taken off their votes or have their voter eligibility challenged is they haven't been participating in the last two presidential cycles. That's 8 years worth of voting here in Georgia, and if you're not participating across that long, then they just kind of assume, okay, let's clear that guy out of here.
Sure.
It's a process that works incredibly well. The concern that people have on the other side is it's not keeping up with the number of folks that should be removed. Unfortunately, in their opinion, the number of folks that should be removed are all Democrats. We haven't seen a focused effort to remove Republican voices from the rolls. And so it's very hard to consider that when they say, well, we're just making sure that it's all honest and fair. It's like, yeah, sort of. And that it's just not the case. And they prove it every single time they pass one of these new laws. They made it easier this cycle for one person to challenge thousands of voters. They made it easier for the state election board to do the kind of things that they've done, which they just recently reopened a 4-year-old investigation that's been settled twice. Because, Mark, you've probably got better research staff going on there than I do. I challenge you to find the last time a presidential candidate identified 3 state election workers by name in a rally speech.
You're right.
I
That is
don't think
odd.
you can.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so this is a plan that they know all the way from top to bottom, and they've got willing actors across this state and many others, and that's what concerns me.
Yeah, this is happening, and again, it's not just Georgia, but it is happening in Georgia. And Georgia, certainly, as I say, they are on the gold medal stand when it comes to disenfranchising voters, and I mean illegally disenfranchising or inappropriately disenfranchising voters.
I think illegally was the right word.
Illegally was the right word. And then we'll move on, I promise. But just to follow up on this on the legal side, there are the legal challenges to these various moves. Are they exhausted, or they're just excruciatingly slow?
They're excruciatingly slow. It's there is not a lot we can do to change the law as it comes to allowing people to challenge votes until we flip the House. So to get rid of those laws, to stop these insane voter challenges at the levels they're coming in, Democrats actually have to take seats in the House, take seats in the Senate, flip the legislature, and pass new law, because those have been passed into law, signed into law by the governor. And so it takes changing the law to get that done. There are a couple of lawsuits pending against the website. In fact, the NAACP here in the state just filed a cease and desist letter in the beginnings of filing a lawsuit against the existence of the website they just opened. We're waiting to see how that plays out. I don't think the state's going to cease and desist. So I think the next step is going to be a lawsuit that's filed. The good news is as we get 45 days away from the election, you can't do any of this stuff anymore. That's federal law. And the other good news is that federal law has a higher level of protection, and a lot of our county boards are going to default to federal law when it comes to those rules and say, look, you're right, we have to obey the law, but federal law succeeds state law, and so we're going to follow the federal law. And so we've got good people on our boards, we've got good people trying to stop it, but I think we're going to see a lot of certification delays, and I think we're going to see a lot of judges saying, you have to do this, you don't have a choice.
For those who are looking in and concerned about Georgia for top of ticket issues, meaning the presidential election, do you see that dance going down with the fake elector folk who are now in control of certification or other aspects of essentially delivering the vote, the actual vote, even as troubled as it might be? Do you see that as an emerging issue, or is that being amplified? Too much is being made of that in media reports that we're seeing out of Georgia?
There is a bit of application of it. I mean, obviously, you hype it up to make it a better story, but that is an emerging issue here in Georgia. It's very much we're going to see problems in the Fulton County system, not because of anything that Fulton County does wrong, but because that's where they keep chipping away at that trust. That's where they keep saying, like I said, they just opened a 4-year-old investigation so they could relook at the investigation that's already been investigated. They just said that board members can refuse to certify elections if they conduct a reasonable inquiry, but they don't define what reasonable inquiry means. And legally in the state of Georgia, through the law and through historical precedents, this is a must thing. It's written in the law as you must certify, and you must certify within 5 days. And it has been continuously for almost 100 years, really, judged as the oldest case of this happening in Georgia was in 1899 in Coffee County. A county board refused to certify a local election, and a judge had to step in 1899 and say, you can't refuse to certify, you have to certify. So we have a huge precedence here of the court system supporting the laws, how it's written, interpreting the law the way that it was meant to be. The interesting thing about the Coffee County reference is, if you recall earlier in the year, in the 2020 election, Coffee County was the one that allowed the members of the Trump team, Giuliani and his crew, to come in and copy the databases down there. And
right. Sure.
Yeah, we're still pending. And what is that? 70 years later, we're like, oh, look, Coffee County's back. It's
oh my God.
A little over 100 years later. So where it starts, I guess, is where it ends. But it's there is an emerging issue. And I think I think the bigger issue is we can see it clearly here in Georgia. It's starting to be reported across the country what's happening. And as we open our eyes to all of that, we can see that it's happening in Nevada, it's happening in Utah, it's happening in Arizona, it's happening in Idaho, it's happening in Kansas, it's happening in Oklahoma, Texas, Florida. And so we can see this beginning of an idea that they're having of some way to cause the election to not happen, essentially.
Right.
Because their ultimate goal is that it gets to a vote in the House of Representatives, this arcane paragraph in the Constitution, Clause 3, that says if you can't certify the election, then the House of Representatives votes with one vote per state. And that's what they're counting on. That's what they want to get it to. And that concerns me from a national perspective, but knowing how it works here in Georgia, knowing that our judicial system has been a strong supporter of our free and fair elections, I don't think they're going to get there. But every single time they try to cast doubt on an election that was free and fair and has been proven so time and time again, they chip away at that trust, they chip away at that foundation. And if you chip away at a foundation long enough, eventually the structure collapses. And that's the part that concerns me, is that our constituency is just not going to have any faith in the election process, despite the complete and utter lack of evidence that there's anything wrong with the election process.
Sure, and that's a kind of voter suppression in itself, because people lose faith inappropriately. I mean, erroneously, in this system, even though the system is fine, but they don't participate because they go, well, the system is all messed up, and you don't even really get. Bob Christian's website is Christian4GA7. That's 7th District in Georgia.com. Christian4GA7.com. I mentioned that for those who are listening and perhaps not watching. We have a lot of, this is also an audio-only podcast that then is on all the major podcast platforms. So just if you're listening, it's Christian4GA7.com. So we only have another minute or so with you, Bob, but I did want to get to some of your positions, and I'm curious of the positions that you regularly visit on the stump to your potential constituency. What things land? I mean, in Georgia, like what are the, again, we get it, 5 times removed, that the cultural wedge issues, like everybody's talking about trans kids, what I mean? It's as though that was the issue confronting America, These cultural wedge issues, the GOP has had great success with them. I'm curious what issues in Georgia and in Georgia's emerging 7th you see your constituency sparking to.
The biggest one, and I've already talked about it here, and it's actually one of the big things that I make as part of my platform, is the infrastructure needs that we have here in the 7th District. As we get further and further north in the district, we are going to need an influx of federal investment to help us build out our infrastructure to meet the growth. And just the way that I talk about it, it resonates. We want to make sure our children have good schools. Well, we need help building those. We want to make sure that we have strong emergency services so that we can keep control of any kind of crime that may come with the growth, so that we can, put out fires that may happen, so that we can take people back and forth to emergency services. Those are the things that resonate, because my big message has always been, for 248 years, we've agreed to disagree in this country. We built institutions that allow us to civilly disagree and still solve problems. And now all of those institutions are under attack. But at the end of the day, I go to the same churches as the people in my community. We go to the same grocery stores every day. Our kids go to the same schools. We drive the same roads. We go to the same parks. We hang out and do the same things. That's what a community is. That's what people coming together to live together do. My neighbor, I call him my fence neighbor. He just recently broke his leg. He's a Trump guy. He's not going to vote. He disagrees with everything that I talk about, but we talk about it, and we talk about it civilly because we live next door to each other for about a decade. When I'm out of town, he keeps an eye on my house. When he's out of town, I do the same for him. When I was the local sports reporter, I wrote articles about his kids. He just recently broke his leg, and I offered to mow his grass, but I was told that his wife had it done. So but he's my neighbor, And no matter what happens in this election, I'm still going to be living next door to the guy, and we're still going to be going to the same grocery stores and same places in town and talking about the same problems on the local level. And that's what we have to remember, is that we are actually all in this together, because we all want the same things. We just have different ideas of what those things mean. And we used to be very, very good in the United States at disagreeing on those problems, but still figuring out ways to solve it. And I'm worried that that's disappearing. And if that disappears, we're going down a dark, deep path.
Couldn't agree more. Such common sense. The demonization of the other side is a scary thing that's emerging in American politics. I love that you're this voice of common sense. And I love your focus on things that will actually help constituents regardless of political party. And you're not an us versus them guy. I wish you such good luck there in the emerging Georgia 7th. It's Christian4GA7.com, Bob Christian. And I'd love to, I don't know if we can do this, but I'd love to check back in with you, maybe in October.
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, let's do that and just get a state of the state at that time.
Well, early voting starts October 15th. If you want to do it before that and see where we're at, or if you want to do it slightly after that and see what we got, it'd be wonderful.
We'll do it a little before that and see where we are. And
right. I would love
maybe give you the Mark Thompson Show bump, which can be a very powerful thing in this world. Bob, so excited to meet you. And again, for your future, I wish you the best. And I'm looking forward to our next conversation. Thanks a lot.
Outstanding.
Bob Christian, everybody. Yeah. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped. And please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.